Hello and welcome to Sidebar with your host, Amrutha. We're going to talk about all things law school admissions, law school, and lawyering. This is the very first episode of this podcast, so it's going to have a little bit more introduction than normal. The legal field is one of the most notoriously gatekept professions. There are some very real barriers, like taking the bar, but there's also artificial barriers. Law school admissions has become a extremely complex universe in and of itself. How do you pay for law school once you're there? Once you actually get to law school, what do you do next? How do you thrive in law school? And then there's a question of what kind of lawyer do you want to be? Do you want to work in a law firm for the first years and then do public interest? Do you want to jump right into public interest? Do you want to be a partner at a law firm? Do you want to work in the government? Do you want to do community side legal services? At the end of the day, whatever you choose, are you going to be happy with the life you built? To consider if being a lawyer is a job or is law a calling? These are some really big questions, and I definitely do not have the answer, but I hope that this is a place where we can talk about this together. All right, let's get into it. I want to start by answering some questions you guys have asked me. I picked 3 questions from students this last week of December. The first question: hey, I'm applying to law school this cycle. Was wondering if January is too late to apply to T14s. From TikTok. Okay. I actually got asked this question from a student who booked a coffee chat with me last week, and they were taking the December LSAT, so they also did not know their LSAT score. So I'm going to sort of like merge these situations. I do not think January is too late to apply. I think that there are applicants who are 100% going to get in January or February, and they might get their dream schools, and everything's going to work out for them. So I just want you to take a breath and know that if your dream is to apply to law school now and start in the fall, I say follow your dreams, full steam ahead. But here are some like practical considerations I would think about. 1, do you have all your application materials ready like right now? And do you have your LSAT score ready right now? Because if the answer is yes to both, that makes your life a lot easier. If you're like, my personal statement's like 80% done and I'm sure I can like whip out the rest over the next week, and you don't know your LSAT score, I would consider pausing just because you don't want to rush your essays. You do not want to compromise the quality of your application materials, how important it is for you to apply in the cycle. Because if this is like a self-imposed deadline, I would say maybe reconsider, and you can apply in the fall, and you can apply in a manner that's a lot less time pressured, and you can give yourself the space and time to really flesh out your application materials. Another option, this might be like hedging your bets, is to apply to just a few of your dream schools right now. It would be much easier for you to prep the application materials and like the supplemental essays for those few schools. And if you don't get in, it's fine. You can apply again in the fall once you're applying to like the full assortment of schools. But know that if you don't get in and you're applying again next year, you will have to rethink your application materials and provide something new. You can't just apply with the same materials. So that is an option, one that you could consider, but that has some drawbacks as well. From Ileana: I just saw your post about getting into Columbia Law, and I would want to get your opinion. Do you think I should still apply if I have a 3.5 GPA and a 178 LSAT? Wow, that is an incredible LSAT. Like, pat yourself on the back. That is like well into the 99th percentile. I understand your reservation is probably surrounding your GPA, but even if you had like a 165 LSAT, I would probably tell you the same advice, which is apply to Columbia. Do not count yourself out. Apply. I think that numbers are one extremely important aspect to admissions. I think especially Columbia, the same is true as it was the year that I applied. Columbia is very like stats predictable, but never count yourself out based on your numbers alone. I don't think people realize what a big role other factors play, specifically stuff on your resume. Like, what experience have you had, internships, work, all of that is awesome. A compelling personal statement. So yes, definitely apply. And again, congratulations, it's awesome. Okay, from Tasha. Now this one's tough. I want to ask something about LSAT studying. I'm not confused with the logic itself. I understand it fine. It's messing me up that I don't know how to start studying in a structured way. There's so many different methods online. It feels important and optional at the same time. I basically don't know what a normal LSAT study day looks like. When do people read lessons? When do they drill? When do they review? I'm gonna like skip to the end of this, but basically your question is, how did you structure your day-to-day studying? Okay, So I took the LSAT back. Now I feel like I'm like, sound so old when I say this, but I took the LSAT back when we had logic games. Not that that like totally changes my formula, but basically, number one thing to do, go to LSAC's website and grab one of their free practice tests and take a blind practice test. And that means you just, without even studying, just take the practice test in the time conditions and see what score you get. If you like are severely not even close to finishing it, you can like forget about the time and just finish it. But the idea is to assess which section is the weakest. I think reading comprehension was the weakest for me. I don't remember if logic games or reading comprehension was the weakest for me, but it was one of those two. So I started by doing the reading comprehension Bible, and I also read the logic games Bible. And then I read the loophole last. So I read these textbooks that were subject matter specific. I also heard the LSAT trainer is a great starting book too. So if you just want a primer on the whole thing, definitely did the textbook reading stuff first. I treated it like a class. And then I moved on to just taking a lot of practice tests. I signed up for LSAT's subscription where you get access to the entire bank of exams. I think that's like so important to do. And so I would take a practice test and then I would spend a lot of time reviewing every single question I got wrong. I had something called a wrong answer journal where I would basically list out every single question I got wrong, why the right answer was correct, why my answer was wrong, what kind of through line I can identify that like explains why I'm making these mistakes. My process for reviewing my wrong answers was so intense that I feel like taking the actual practice test itself was like the easy part. My advice is basically just to like really understand why you got things wrong, and the speed will naturally pick up over time. So those are the questions for today. Please keep asking me questions. I'm kind of scared to open my TikTok DM sometimes because there's like half of it is like TikTok bots. And so leave comments on my posts, leave comments on this podcast. Now I want to chat a little bit about me in the spirit of introduction. I'm actually in my childhood bedroom. So this is like very nostalgic. I grew up in Arizona. I went to high school here. And in high school, I was honestly very lost. I think I was like a good student, but I really didn't even care that much about school because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think I just assumed I would be pre-med, and maybe that's tied to me just being brown and my mom being a nurse, and so like being a doctor was this like coveted thing. But all of that sort of changed in college. I ended up picking the University of Miami and studying there because I got this Foot Fellow Award, and it allowed me to get a dual degree in English and biochem. So I was like, sweet, I don't even need to like really pick what I want. These were two disciplines that I just like loved, science and English. And so I felt very lucky that I got to do both. And my English classes were awesome. I was like reading Shakespeare and Jane Austen. And then I would go to my biochem classes and learn about like cancer. And it was such a dichotomy. And my spring semester of my freshman year, I took a class with a judge, and this is my first time actually meeting an attorney, and she was like one of the coolest people I know to this day. Her name is Judge Venzer, and she teaches a class on the prison system in America. It's just like one of the most phenomenal classes at the University of Miami. If you're a student there, like please look her up. She's incredible. I was in a class full of people who were like had been in this like pre-law community, whether they wanted to be lawyers or their parents were lawyers or they were just like interested in these sorts of things. So it was really exciting to be in these sorts of classes and having these discussions and being around these people. And it made me realize like, wait, I think I resonate with this like tenfold more than the whole pre-med track. And so the summer after my freshman year, the story is so like pre-COVID. I told myself I was going to shadow with this doctor that I had previously shadowed in high school. But then I was like, okay, before I commit to doing that all summer long, let me have 1 week. Like, let me give myself a shot at doing something in the legal field. I like dressed up in this suit from high school from Forever 21, and I printed out my resume that was probably like a god-awful resume, and I went to all the law firms in like a 5-mile radius around this like suburb where I live, and it was a personal injury firm. And I handed them my resume and I was like, hi, my name is Amrutha, and I would love to just like work for you for free. Like I'm trying to gain exposure. And like I don't even think I articulated myself well at all. I especially did not know how to back then. I think like multiple offices were just like, okay, great, we'll be in touch. Like, never got back to me, which is so fair. But there was this one attorney who did, and he welcomed me. To be fair, I didn't really do much work because like I really couldn't. And so like once a week I'd go and chat with the paralegals, and there were a few times where he took me to court, and that was incredible. It was like once or twice, and that attorney was just very inspiring to me personally. He was in an accident and he was in a wheelchair, and he was able to just like command a room, be an advocate on behalf of his client in a way that I just kind of realized like whatever reservations I have about public speaking or talking or what I look like, any of that, like I just need to throw that out the window because that's just my own fear getting in my head. So that was my aha, I want to go to law school moment. And then after that, I was just like, I joined the pre-law clubs, which we didn't have a ton at my school, and we didn't have a pre-law counselor at the time at my school either. And so in some way the pre-law club sort of served as that like that role of like helping those of us that were interested in law school. And the president of the pre-law club, she became my friend, and she was the first one to really like lay out for me, these are all the things you need to do to apply to law school. And she was my peer, she was my year, and her name was Jordan. She was another incredible person in my life. She didn't need to explain these basic things to me like that, but after she gave me basic information, I started going to like virtual information sessions of law schools that I was interested in. And it's actually like so funny because I got so deep in that world junior year, senior year, because I thought I was going to apply my senior year. I ended up taking a gap year. But then at that point, I had like 3 years of like thinking about my law school admissions under my belt. And so I applied to law school, got in. The same person who like helped me out initially, I ended up chatting with her about her admissions materials, which is like so funny and so full circle. But that's why it's just like so important to have a community and so important to help others in this process. My junior and senior year, every summer, I still worked at the wet lab doing cancer research. I still somehow didn't really find any substantive legal experience at all. And I was stressed about that. Like, I would be on like an LSAC forum or one of these like virtual information sessions with the law school, and I'd be like, so like, just be honest with me. How bad is it if you don't do a legal internship? Because I can like find one if it's like really important. Like, trust me, I'll go and find one. And they were all like, it's fine. Just like do whatever it is that you're interested in. And I get it now. Like, now that I'm in law school, I get it because I look around at my peers and I'm like, you guys, most of you are not like the cookie cutter political science, did one legal internship, and now you're here. You guys are like full individuals that have like things you're passionate about that is so niche that like you obviously have to be passionate about it to do this, because this isn't something that you thought was going to be like your gold star getting into law school. I'll be honest, there are a few people that I'm like, wow, this is like the perfect background for someone applying to law school. But there's also people with very varied experiences. And I think that now we're understanding that that's sort of what people are looking for as well in law school admissions. I took the LSAT at the beginning of my junior year, and so this is like kind of going back to my LSAT story. I got a good score. I got a 171. But I just kind of felt like I had a little bit more to give. I had completely self-studied for it, but I felt like if I had gone with a tutor, even for like 1 or 2 sessions, I would have done better. And I had worked enough in my part-time job at that point to afford a few sessions with the tutor. And so I just felt like it made a lot of sense. I also talked to a professor at the University of Miami who was like informally everyone's law school advisor because we didn't have that. And so it's funny, I didn't even have this professor. My boyfriend, who I met in undergrad, took a class with him and was like, oh, this person's incredible. And he was, by the way. I might have called him 2 or 3 times during my undergrad experience. And every single time it was like a 10-minute phone call that was just somehow momentous and blew my mind. So the very first time we talked, he was like, wow, you have like such a cool background. You should consider taking a gap year though. And I took the LSAT and I was very like, like, no, like I don't want to take a gap year. Especially because like my parents were like, don't take a gap year. You're just gonna like lose focus or lose track of what you want to do and just end up doing something else. Like, you want to go to law school, so like apply now. He was the one person to tell me like, no, I think you should like take a gap year. For one, I would have a better GPA because my senior year GPA would be included, and freshman year with Orgo was like by far the worst part of my transcript. Two, I could retake the LSAT, feel more confident the second time around. And he was the one that was like, look, I was so broke in undergrad, I could not have afforded a tutor. But if there was one thing I would tell everyone is I could go back in time, is to figure out a way to scrounge up the money and pay for a tutor, because every point you get higher on your LSAT is so much more money you are bringing in. And I want to echo that, if at all financially possible, figure out a way to give yourself the best shot of succeeding on the LSAT, because it really does make a huge difference with money in the long run, if money is your focus. And so I graduated. I had like a much better resume. I had better grades, and I took the LSAT again May, shortly after graduating, and I got a slightly higher LSAT score. I got a 174. And then I had a couple months where I was just like feeling very like lost and confused, because I graduated, yet I couldn't find a job. So I was like, how am I going to get into law school if I couldn't find a job? Mind you, with my 2 degrees, and not one of them is helping me find a job. And I was writing my personal statement. I had this notes app starting like in 2020, like during COVID, where every time I thought of like a cool quote or like a theme that I wanted to incorporate in my personal statement, I would write it. So that was like, highly recommend that. I had that to work off of. But even then, I had maybe like 13 iterations of my personal statement that I fine-tuned that summer. And I worked very closely with my school's writing center, which I very much recommend doing, because universities typically have a writing center that like no one knows about and alumni can use at least like a year or two out from graduation. And it's a completely free service. And so I had this one person who I would meet with like on a weekly basis. And I was like, you are my godsend, because you are helping me so much with this personal statement process. Because the thing about personal statements is that they are so deeply personal that it feels like you have a third party editing your diary entry, which is not, it doesn't feel good. And it doesn't feel good to scrap some of your own work. I think there's this quote that says, kill what you love the most, or there's a phrase like that in brief writing. And I'm not saying it perfectly, but the point is like, if you really like something, like a way you phrase something or a certain sentence, other people might hate it, or it might actually be bad and you're just holding on to it because you love it so much. And so you need someone else to tell you like, that sounds god awful, which she did for me, which was great. I think a big reason why writing the personal statement was so difficult for me was the fact that I had just graduated from undergrad and I had to like rediscover who I was in my 20s. At the time I moved in with my boyfriend who lived in New York, so it was a brand new city as well. And I was like, who am I, like untethered from this academic institution or any academic institutions for the first time in my life? It was really hard to figure that out for myself. Personal statements, in a weird way, forced the answer out of me at a time that I really needed it the most. So this is like some weird pitch for personal statements, I guess. But like, I would say embrace the process of writing those essays, because I think you learn a lot about yourself. And at the end of the day, and this is also like, it goes back to like my advice, like let yourself have the time to craft these materials so you feel like you put everything on the table and you gave everything you had to give. Because I mean, ideally, you only go through this process once. I had been like very meticulous in getting all of the pieces of all my applications sorted out that summer. And so I slowly started applying to law school September through November. I think a couple schools I applied to in January as well. And I began posting when I would submit an application and the decision I'd hear back. And then it was just so cool hearing from so many of you about like your interest in the schools that I was getting into or I'd applied to. And then I was like, wait, I have like an obsessive amount of knowledge of this stuff from like years. And I had like a crazy Google Drive of like, I'm like such a planner. So of course, everything I do is like planned years in advance. And so I had been building out this Google Drive of like information for all these different schools. And so I made videos that were targeted to specific schools that I am hesitant to like repeat as law now because it's probably outdated. But I think that they're good starting grounds, or at least things that you might want to consider asking admissions representatives now to see, is this still true? Sure, some things have changed, but some things also do not change because this is law and things are slow to change. The second half of my gap year ended up being one of the most precious gifts. After I submitted my applications, I quit my job working as a scribe at an oncology clinic. It was extremely depressing, and honestly, they kind of treat you terribly. So shout out to scribes out there everywhere. the pay was worse than the local Whole Foods. Like, I don't really have too many positive experiences to say about that. Instead, I started working at a nonprofit in Arizona, and I got really good work experience, but I also had a lot of free time, and I volunteered at my local animal shelter, played guitar, wrote music, got into running. I listened to a lot of podcasts. I was making a lot of TikToks, watching other TikTokers. I just felt like I really got to access this really creative part of me. I was writing a lot of songs and playing guitar, and maybe it was all bad, I don't know, but it was so fun. And like, what a gift it is to have time like that, especially when you start law school, the rest of your life is just like staring at you in your face. And so it's such a blessing to have some time before that starts where you can just work a job like a normal person and just be a normal human. Cup was full, so excited to start law school. And like 1L fall like totally drained every little bit I had in that cup. So if there's one thing you take away from this, try to get into law school with a full cup. The first few weeks of law school, there's this huge emphasis on like socializing and meeting everyone, and it's like so fun. And then so very quickly it gets so serious because in September you have classes and you're assigned so much reading every night. Like, I don't even know how to explain. When you're a 1L and you don't even know how to read case law yet, or if you're like me, like had literally never read a case before, it's going to take you a ridiculous amount of time. So I walked into my very first class, day one, not having done the reading, because in my undergrad and most of the classes I took, the first day, all the professor did was go over the syllabus. You weren't really expected to have done a lot of work yet because people could have switched into the class like that morning. And I'm realizing that obviously was not a thing in law school because they pre-assign you your classes. So it's not like you could like affirmatively switch into one and therefore not have had access to the syllabus. Like, we all got access. And we had readings, and I didn't even check Canvas. To be honest, I didn't even really like understand how to use Canvas at that point. And so imagine my surprise. I go to class at like 9:30 a.m. I don't remember the time now. I think it's 9. I'm sitting in my class and my professor starts cold calling people on their reading. I like in real time watched in horror witnessing cold calling. I was like, this is just like Legally Blonde. People actually get called on. And he just knew it. And this class was like a no laptop class. So he literally had the textbook in front of him, which, mind you, I didn't even have a textbook yet because I was like, this is syllabus week. I don't have a textbook yet. Like, I'm gonna go pick up my textbook after class today, but like, you know, is the textbook even needed? Yeah, like they are needed. One out there needed. I just sat there in horror, like, please God, I do not want to get called on in class. Like, I don't have the textbook, I don't have the reading, I don't have my laptop because we can't have our laptop, I don't have my phone. Like, I would just sit there and be like, I'm so sorry. Like, and I feel like that was like so disrespectful to the professor. I don't know. I was just like absolutely freaking out. I did not get called on that entire day of classes, but there was a point after the first class where I was like, maybe I should just go home because I like am like so sorely underprepared. And that was when it hit me, like law school was like very serious. I need to go home and like study. And so that night I did all the reading I was supposed to have done, and then I did all the reading for the next day. And I think I might have stayed up to like 3 a.m. or something. And like that entire week, it just felt like I was like trying so hard, yet moving so slow. I would literally like get into bed with my textbook, read it, and then fall asleep because I was so tired and sleep deprived. Wake up and then keep reading. It was like panic studying and so poorly executed and kind of ludicrous. And I wish I like recorded some of what I did back then because it's so funny. So like all of September was just me getting to a place where I could do my readings in a way that felt effective, in that I was actually grasping what I was supposed to get, and also that I was able to do it in a reasonable amount of time so I could go to bed and get like a reasonable amount of sleep. And so that was just September. And October, it kind of felt like we were just so busy with random things. Like, we have a legal writing class, all 1L students do. Some places call it legal skills, and you have memos due in that class, and you're learning like the nuts and bolts of legal writing, which is like extremely important for actual legal practice, especially if you're in litigation. We have things like barrister's ball. People are still going to bar review every week. I was on student government my first year, so we actually organized bar reviews. Bar reviews are when the law school goes to a specific bar every Thursday. It's like an opportunity for everyone to like socialize. I can't say I go too much right now, But 1L was like super fun, great way to meet your peers. And then by the time November rolls around, I remember there was like this tangible, like really intense vibe at the law school. Like I literally remember as soon as November started, like people just seemed stressed. And that was when I realized, like, oh shoot, like I need to understand what's happening in my classes. Like not just like your day-to-day cases and be able to like answer that, but to understand big picture how the doctrine fits together, which is like a whole other beast in and of itself. And so I spent a lot of that time playing catch up and trying to understand my classes. Around Thanksgiving, I actually started outlining, which was honestly pretty late. I think a lot of people are able to pull that off successfully, but I'm so weird about outlining. I don't know why, but it takes me forever, even now. And so I didn't get my outlining done until like the day before my exams for the most part. For many exams, I didn't look at any of the practice tests, even if they were publicly available, which, by the way, in law school, usually they have a website that's like an exam bank, and they post out the teachers' past exams so that students have access to them, as well as some sort of rubric or model answer sometimes. Sometimes you don't get anything. Actually, commonly you don't get anything. By finals, I was so burnt out. A week later, when I described how I was living during finals to my brother over winter break, I was like, that is a dopamine fast, which is basically when you like rob yourself of like anything that makes you happy, like listening to music or hanging out with your friends or going to a party or eating really good food. I had unintentionally been on a dopamine fast during finals. Like, I didn't even listen to music when I showered. I was usually listening to lectures or I was watching lectures while I was eating. And it was because I was just like, didn't get it. Like, I didn't get my classes. I needed to catch up. Like, I needed to clock in those hours and I didn't spread it out properly. And so I was just in a state of panic for so long. And I think it really like got it hit its apex during my civil procedure exam, which was like a 6 hour long exam with no designated breaks. And I experienced something that I think runners get where you hit a wall. Like, for the first time in my entire existence, my brain just fully shut down. Like, I couldn't think and I couldn't even come up with a plan out of it. Um, like, oh, go to the bathroom, meditate for 5 minutes and come back. Like, I couldn't even form that thought. And so that exam was just like went poorly for me with that, with also some other tech issues as well. And I kind of realized like it's possible that I do not know enough for these classes. It's likely that I don't know enough, but I can't treat myself this way. I've got to stop. And so I had one more exam left that final season, and I took a like full study break the following day after Civ Pro, and I went on a treadmill for like 5 minutes, but that was like the closest I got to working out during finals. And I literally like felt my brain start to work again. And I watched like the Barbie movie, which I just like didn't get time to watch all semester, and it was awesome. And I just like chilled out. Like I think I cooked for the first time. I took my last exam and that ended up being the exam that I did the best in. So studied less for it. But law school exams are just like so long and require so much analytical thinking. Like you need your brain to be a fully charged battery by the time you walk in. After that was winter break. And when I got home, again, something I had never experienced before, I literally slept for like a week straight. Like I would come downstairs, eat some food, and then I would just like do nothing and then get to bed and sleep. And then I remember feeling like I woke up and I felt like healed and it was like Christmas already. Then 1L recruiting started. And so I spent a week or two between that time and New Year's calling like 3Ls and 2Ls and like attorneys that had graduated from Penn and asking if they could hop on a call. I learned a lot about the 1L firm admissions process. And I got on a call with the 3L who at the time gave me some advice that I think he was like, I know this is crazy, but this is how you land a 1L big law job. And I was like, just tell me, like, I'm not going to judge you. And it was that I should apply to 75 to 100 summer associate positions over winter break or in January if I want a guaranteed like 1L big law firm offer or as close to a guarantee as possible. And so I don't think I hit that metric. I think I hit like between 50 to 75, but it was a lot. It was like, for me, it was way harder than the 2L recruiting process because I had very little to work with. I didn't even have my transcript or my grades yet. I was also like applying to so many places, so there was like no way that I could have gotten in contact with someone at each of these places. I did my best. And also the 1L numbers are awful. It was also like a lot of rejections, which I could not let get to me because I was like, you cannot let rejection slow you down in big law recruiting. It's like really hard because you're like, oh, I talked to these people and they seem to like me. And I interviewed with them for hours and hours, but you cannot let it get to you. I also went to a few home for the holidays events, but there's nothing in Arizona, of course. So I drove to LA and I actually ended up meeting with people at the firm that I ended up working at that summer. So over the course of the next month, even when I went back to Penn, I was doing a lot of interviews and I even had to fly to California and like miss some classes, which sucked. So again, extremely time consuming and stressful. One of the worst parts was keeping on top of all the emails you get, because if a firm asks if you want to interview, you need to respond very quickly and tell them, yes, I can interview with you like tomorrow, because these spots just get filled up so fast. And so I ended up getting a few big law firm offers. And so I felt like very happy about that, of course. And I ended up working in Southern California that first summer. And I think the spring semester, there was a lot of like recruiting events every single night. Just like the fall, we had our legal writing class. Instead of 3 doctrinals though, we had 2 doctrinals and then we had 2 electives. And I took Introduction to IP, and that was my first time in a law school class where I was like, holy crap, like I am obsessed with this. Like, this is so fun. I want to participate in all these discussions. It's a survey course on copyright, trademarks, patents, and trade secrets. And I came in kind of thinking, okay, IP is probably what I'm going to do because I studied biochem, so patents is like the obvious choice. But I was always curious about like music, copyright, and like fashion and trademarks. And so like that class was so fun. I also took criminal law and constitutional law that semester. Those are some extremely fun classes. So I was like starting to actually enjoy law school and like the classes and feeling like I belonged, even if I thought my fall semester was like extremely difficult for me. And in the fall, I wasn't sure how I could keep going. I wasn't sure how I fit into law school or if I did, but the spring was good. That summer, I worked at a law firm for the first time. And at the same time, I was getting my grades back for the spring. And I ended up doing better than I did in the fall. And I was also doing 2L summer recruiting, which was absolutely insane to work at a firm and then be recruiting for firms on top of that. But they kind of understand that that's a drill with like the weird timeline. In the past, 2L recruiting happened in August before your second year of law school. And so for it to happen June and July, like while you're at another firm, is like extremely weird. And everyone kind of knew that. And so there was a lot of like grace given, which was helpful and I appreciated. There were times when I was like flying out to different cities and interviewing. And these interviews at law firms are like half a day. They're long, they're exhausting. I was so convinced I wanted to work in patents in Southern California. And I ended up going with a firm in New York for 2 reasons. One, their IP team was doing all forms of IP. So I was able to not just do patents, but also trademarks and copyrights. And that was like really fun. And for me, I didn't want to foreclose those options. I think when you pick patents early in your career, you're sort of specializing and you don't really get to go back from that. This is my understanding. I could be totally wrong. But even though like I have my STEM background, I love the rest of it too. So I didn't want to give it up. The second reason was that just like culturally, I felt like a really good fit with the firm and that team in particular. There was just like this welcoming presence that I hadn't really experienced in other law firm settings. And I had this feeling in my gut, like, I think these people will care about me and want to grow and mentor me. And I think what I'm looking for then and now is for the first few years as an attorney to really be like sharpened into the best attorney I can be. And I think those first few years are so important because you are a sponge soaking everything up. And it's really important that you're in an environment that is conducive to your success and your development and your growth, not just putting you on doc review and ignoring you and treating you like another cog in the system. As far as you can find an environment in big law that feels like there's a community there and there's mentorship and they want to make you better, and there's like this like symbiotic relationship, I think that extends beyond money. I would say like follow your gut and take those opportunities. Then in the fall, I took it very easy with classes. I took copyright, which was a blast. I loved. And I also took this class called Positive Psychology, which is about how to be happy as a lawyer. And I'm probably going to borrow from the stuff I thought about and learned about in that class because I want to spread the good word. If you have a positive psychology class in your law school, take it. If you're at Penn, take this class. It's so awesome. We learn things that are like applicable to everyone, like meditation's good for you, etc. But we also learned some like really interesting things about people in law school in particular. All of TUA, I got really good grades. And in the spring, I took a couple more classes feeling like, okay, I think I've got this down. I'm scared, but I'm gonna like take more classes. And I did well in the spring. In the spring, I also took 2 bioethics classes through the medical school. And I'm now like taking on this additional master's degree. I wrote a paper on expanding access to reproductive health products that, like, fingers crossed I one day get published. And I also took trademarks, which was like also awesome, and patents. So you get like, what I mean by like once you find what you love in law, like it's just incredible because you just take a bunch of classes in it and then it does not feel like a traditional doctrinal at all. That summer I worked at the firm that I'll be going to once I graduate, and that was like such a good professional experience for me because I realized what it's like to be a big law lawyer in New York. And so did all my other friends because we were all at these different firms, and it felt like we all had just like such different experiences, even within the same firm, but in different practice groups. I think my writing skills got much better. I think I really sharpened my professional skills, communication, emailing, which is like so much more important than anyone ever thinks it is, but also brief writing and hearing how attorneys talk to clients. Like I learned so much. I don't know if this took root that summer or at some point like that year. Maybe it was the fact that I turned 25 and my brain fully developed, but I started becoming extremely hyper aware and hypercritical of almost everything I said and did. I just started like hyper analyzing and hyper fixating on myself and like if I fit this standard of this ideal lawyer, because I noticed I was becoming someone who spoke in a way that almost hid some of what I was feeling. As a result, I almost felt like I was censoring myself. And I think there's going to be a lot of people in the legal profession that try to censor you or tell you can't talk about certain things. And you just can't be one of those people. So like I got to this weird place where, and I think I used to be one of the most extroverted people I know, where I was like a self-declared introvert. I found a lot of joy my fall semester in my mentorship roles. I teach a legal writing class, which is so cool, to first year students, and I'll be doing so in the spring as well. I also TA'd for copyright and like helped a lot of students, I'd like to think, understand the subject better. Truth be told, I felt like I would just like mess up an interaction. Like whether it was talking to a mentee, like maybe I'd give bad advice. I think it was just like this weird bout of like imposter syndrome. That even now, like I can't fully understand why it happened. I think there's a part of me that realized at some point this summer, or maybe in the fall, I don't know, that like I'm going to places in life that feel extremely untethered from anything my parents have done or their parents have done, that anyone in my family has done, but even anyone in the community that I grew up in. Sometimes it almost feels, when you're a first generation lawyer, that you're like drifting off in space sometimes, and you look around and you're like, I don't recognize anyone here. Do I recognize myself? I think it comes with knowing you're doing something that at one point felt so big and insurmountable, but little by little, you hiked up that mountain and you got there, and you're looking around and you're in awe, but you're also like deeply terrified. Last semester, I took a class with 2 judges, and it was called Complex Litigation. And a big part of that class was learning how to do oral arguments in front of real judges, and they would provide feedback. And one thing they kept saying was, you can't go up there and argue on behalf of your client in a manner that like parrots someone else. You can't think to yourself like, oh, I want to argue like this person does, and try to pass it off as your own. You need to be true to yourself. But I think that when you're in law school and when you're a young attorney, you are a sponge, and rightfully so. You are soaking up the advice of everyone around you, people who have done the things you want to do and done it well. But in that process, you cannot lose yourself and you cannot lose your voice. In a weird roundabout way, I've made it my goal this year to sort of bring back my voice, whatever that looks like. And I really do think a big part of this is going to be having this podcast and having my last few months to share my thoughts in this manner. This podcast has been a dream of mine, 3 years in the making. I first had the idea for this in like June or July of 2023, so the summer before I started law school. And I always thought to myself, how cool would it be if I started this podcast in law school and I talked about all the stuff I've experienced, but also what I'm experiencing as I go through it. And in many ways, my TikTok platform, LegallyAmrutha, has been like a great way to do that. But I think long form content just holds such a special place in my heart. I get to just talk and ramble, and I don't have to edit my videos down to like 2 minutes. I want to be honest and at times vulnerable and at times borderline overshare, because I think that's something we're missing and part of what contributes to the gatekeeping in this profession. This is a limited series podcast because I will not be able to podcast once I start my job in September. But I think that gives me a deadline to get out what I need to get out and hopefully connect with a lot of you guys along the way. If you guys have questions, please send them to me. Somehow it is 3 a.m. right now, so I have to go to bed. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I'll see you next week. Bye.